In this last episode before the winter break, we'll continue with analyzing the Nimzo-Indian defense. In last week's episode, we finished our analysis of the Rubinstein variation, so this week we'll continue by analyzing white fourth move queen to c2.
We have all heard that queen movement in the opening is to be avoided, but sometimes it is the recommended way to go. The purpose of this move is to protect the e4 square and the knight on c3 simultaneously, making it so that white can escape the otherwise common future double pawns and the c-file.
The downside of this move is that it involves movement with the queen, giving white a slow development. But even though it might be considered slow, it is favored by many because of the stability it gives the white position.
Black does mainly have three ways to continue after this move, either by playing d5, c5 or castle kingside. These three moves were long considered at one point or another to refute the white queen to c2. But in the 1990s, new assessments were made and variations were renewed, and ever since queen to c2 has been considered a rather dangerous move for black.
What this means is that white has to know his theory in order to be able to use this line effectively. Because otherwise white will most probably stumble upon the variations, giving black such a good position that it took about 60 years before queen to c2 was considered to pull its own weight.
Black's d5 was long considered to be black's best move, giving black an advantage, and even though that isn't the case today, it still is a very common move and it leads to many interesting variations. With this move, black pushes forward in the center, attempting to take over the initiative, and white should answer in kind by capturing on d5 with the c-pawn. Instead of capturing on d5, it is possible to play a3, forcing away the bishop from b4, but after an exchange on c3 and black's knight to e4, followed by queen to c2, the white development is considered a bit slow.
After a capture on d5, black is to recapture on d5. But with which piece? Well, a capture with either the queen or the pawn is recommended, even though a capture with the queen might seem strange. But to take on d5 with the knight should be avoided. This since it gives white a solid center after a3, an exchange on c3, bishop to a5, and knight to f3. The position is equal and arguably white can be considered to have a small advantage. White does simply have a position which is easier to play from.
Black was also able to recapture with the queen on d5. This move threatens the pawn on d4, a weakness in the white position which occurred after white's queen to c2. Naturally, white should protect the pawn by either playing e3 or knight to f3. After knight to f3, black should avoid playing c5, because this is followed by bishop to d2 and an exchange on c3, giving white quite a nice center and well-developed pieces.
So instead of c5, black should play the less natural move queen to f5, after which an exchange on f5 is played. The endgame which follows is perfectly equal. White might want to avoid a queen exchange and play queen to b3 instead, and even though it is playable, it resigns several important squares to the black queen, giving it a very good position on f5.
Other than taking with the knight or the queen, black can recapture on d5 with the pawn. Against this, white should play bishop to g5, which is followed by h6, and an exchange on f6, a3, and an exchange on c3, castle kingside, e3, and c6.
The position is fairly static but equal, and if you prefer the kind of play, you will have an advantage because many players are unaware of how to play in positions as these. But with that, we will end this last episode of the opening school before the winter break. We'll be back again in January with more on the Nimzo-Indian, so see you then.